There are times when we don't reach our potential, and still God used him, and still God can use us, because God is a God that uses flawed people to bring about his purposes. And so in Samson's story, we can see our own story. Hello and welcome to week 4, our final week in our study of the life of Samson. Most of us know the name and a little bit about the life of Alexander Hamilton. He's been made a little bit more famous by the recent Broadway musical, but Hamilton was one of the most intelligent and also one of the youngest of our founding fathers. In fact, many people don't realize that he was probably George Washington's most trusted advisor. He single-handedly did the work to make the Constitution possible. In fact, he and James Madison together were the ones that pushed it through and brought that massive project to completion. So in a lot of ways, our nation owes quite a bit to Alexander Hamilton. The truth is, he probably was on track to become president of the United States, perhaps the second or third president, until he had an affair that really derailed his life and kind of changed everything for him. And of course, we know that his life ended in an ill-conceived duel with Aaron Burr. And the life of Alexander Hamilton ended when he was only 47 years old. His is the story of squandered potential. In 1888, the very first Kodak camera was invented. And very quickly, the Kodak Eastman Company became the leader in the field of photography. And in fact, by 1922, their company had grown so much and they had grown so wealthy that they were the second largest purchasers of silver in the United States, second only to the U.S. Treasury. Over the next 100 years, Kodak Eastman dominated the photography industry. In 1975, one of their engineers invented one of the first digital cameras. And when he brought it to his leadership, he was told, "That's cute, but don't tell anyone about it." You see, as a result of being unable to see the future, Kodak Eastman took a very negative turn in the digital age. In fact, in 2012, they had to file for bankruptcy. Now, they eventually made it out of bankruptcy, but they never grew back to the heights that they had once been. The story of their company is indeed a story of squandered potential. Len Bias was a college basketball player at Maryland. He was an All-American, and in 1986, he was considered to be one of the best players, if not the best player, in the draft that year. In fact, many people were comparing him to Michael Jordan. He was that level of a player. And on draft night, he was chosen second by the Boston Celtics. He was going to have an opportunity to go play with Larry Bird and many other Hall of Fame players on a team that would contend for the championship every year. And 2 nights later, 2 nights after the draft, Len Bias died from a cocaine overdose. His was a life, his was a story of squandered potential. Now, we could obviously add Samson to this list, couldn't we? Samson had massive potential, but his life story is a story of squandered potential. He was distracted by the desires of his eyes. He was distracted by his conflict with the Philistines and his consistent need for revenge. He was distracted by his love affair with Delilah and the desires of the flesh that she represented. His distractions destroyed him. But in the end, God delivered him and won a mighty victory through him. You see, in Samson's story, we see the gospel. We see that God delivers his people even when they don't earn it, even when they don't deserve it. And how wonderful is it to know that we serve and we love a God who will always deliver us even when we don't earn it, even when we don't deserve it. In the story of Samson, we see the gospel. In the story of Samson, we see our own story, because we know that just like him, we have flaws. There are times when we don't reach our potential, and still God used him, and still God can use us, because God is a God that uses flawed people to bring about his purposes. And so in Samson's story, we can see our own story. And in Samson's story, we can see our own potential. God gave Samson this incredible purpose. He was to begin delivering his people from the Philistines. And he gave Samson all the gifts he would need to do that. In the same way, God has a great purpose for you. It may not be to deliver your people from the Philistines, but he has a specific purpose for you. And he has given you the gifts and the resources and the abilities and the experiences and the passions to accomplish that purpose. And when you're willing to use what God has given you for him, you will accomplish those purposes and you will experience the life that he created you to live. Now, you are not Samson. In fact, in many ways, your life is not like Samson's at all. But in some ways, Samson's story is your story. And so today, as we wrap up this series, you're going to spend some time recapping the story of Samson. And as you do that, hopefully you'll discover a little bit more about your own purpose, and you'll discover a little bit more about who God is. And all of that will bring you closer to him and closer to Jesus. And I hope that by the time you're done today, you'll have a good understanding of what Jesus expects from you, what Jesus wants for you, what the next step is that he wants you to take. So lean into this conversation. Don't be afraid to participate. Listen well to the others in your group because you may be surprised by what you learn. And then leave with an action step. Whether it's a big step or a little step, share it with your group so they can pray for you. And when they share theirs, make sure that you pray for them. And now, let's talk it out.